Okay, so what we are talking about today is kind of the behind the scenes of how we continue to show up. We'll definitely walk you through some of like how we showed up at the beginning of this, what we prioritize in our business, what we focus on, and basically like how we still get results during difficult, challenging times. I think this is, of course, one of them, but Megan was also my OBM when I was getting divorced as well, and when I was going through a lot of challenging times then. So I think we've kind of just like gotten it down to like, this is how we handle, you know, hard things, how we handle difficult times or chaos or whatever. So we're going to walk you guys through that because I think that's especially relevant now. But I think everyone knows who you are, but just tell them about you and who you are before we move on. And if you guys are here, say hi.
So I'm Megan Schopieray. I am the COO of A Lit Up Life, and I basically have been behind the scenes of the business for, I don't even know, 3 years, 4, something like that.
Like 3.5 probably.
Yeah. So I basically just help behind the scenes, making sure that everything is running smoothly and set up systems and processes and helping the day-to-day operations run smoothly.
Yeah. Run very smoothly. She's the best ever. And basically I've just been having Megan come on to these lives about once a month. Obviously we rescheduled a couple, just so you guys can hear from her, because I think that that's like really a disservice to only hear from me in a sense. Because of course I know my business really, really well. And of course I can speak to it, but I think Megan has different perspective just being so in it and behind the scenes with us every day. So I just want you guys to be able to hear from her as well, because I think that makes a big difference. Okay. So basically the first thing that we always think about in our business, and just so you know, like this applies now and during regular times too, but I think we'll obviously be filtering it through the lens of now, but this isn't something that's like only applicable now, if that makes sense. So what we always focus on first in A Lit Up Life is people. Like that is the number one thing for us always. And I think that something that's really important to say about that is I think that a lot of times as businesses grow, it can be easy to forget that or let go of that. And I think sometimes at the beginning, it's also really easy to forget that and let go of that, right? And what I mean by that is like, we can get really focused on like profit or results or systematizing or this or that. And like the thing that we do really well at A Lit Up Life, and that we have always done, and that Megan's team supports me to do really well, is to keep people the focus. And so that is like the first thing that we went into when all of this started to kind of happen and things started to feel chaotic. Like our first question was, how do we serve our people? Megan, maybe you could talk about like what that looks like for you on the back end, but I think it's just like really important to say, like, if you focus on your people, your business will continue to grow, right?
Yeah, I think that it's like, it's one of those things that this is always the top priority, but we just leaned into it more heavily.
Yep.
I guess like it was just like
Totally.
more of our time and attention was dedicated to people. Just, you know, because I think that that was, you know, it's always the priority, but we just leaned into it even more. Right. So I think a lot of it for like on the back end was just actually like sending out, like making sure that we were following up on the back end more frequently, having more touch points, especially, you know, as you are booking clients that aren't starting yet, right? But like booking them to start a few months out, and just really making current clients and future clients really feel taken care of and feel like they're not just alone or on their own during the process, right?
Totally. So 2 things, if you guys are here, say hi. And also if you have any random questions you just want Megan to answer while she's here, you might as well. So feel free to drop those below too, or if there's anything you'd love to hear us talk about in partnership. Again, like we're trying to do these once a month, but we don't always get to them. So if you have any questions at all, just get them out. Now's the time. Also just say hi to us so we're not lonely. But yeah, I think so. Something that's true in a lit up life is that, like Megan was saying, we have clients booked pretty far in advance. I think we just booked our last August spot today. So we're booked through September at this point. And so obviously that's great, but during a time where things feel really chaotic, that is something that I take very seriously, is that those clients that are booked out still feel my support, even though they're not accessing, full coaching until whatever it is, August or September. And I think that, it's almost too easy to be like, they're already booked in, what's next kind of thing. But what I have found over and over again in this business is that the more you take care of the people that are already bought into you, that already are working with you, that already want to work with you, the more people that want that. Like, the only reason we're even booked out that far is because I take really, really excellent care of my clients, right? And so this just felt like an opportunity to double down on that. Like, I knew everyone was feeling uncertain. And so what I did was basically kind of like went on a binge, so to speak, in terms of like making videos, reaching out to people, creating resources for my clients, that kind of thing. And then what Megan and the team did was make sure that got out to everybody, make sure people were getting those, make sure they were opening them and that they felt our support. And so this is good at any time, right? Like, of course, this is good now. And of course, we doubled down on it when people were feeling that extra anxiousness, right? But this is useful and good and important anytime in your business. The more you can go, people are a priority. How do I serve our current people? The more results you'll continue to get. And so, just like getting your team's help with that, I think is really important to note. Like, I feel like it would have been easy for me to almost be like, oh my God, I like don't even have time to like create more things or do this outreach or whatever. But because I have a team that I know I can like hand something to and be like, hey, this video needs to get to every client that signed up with us that hasn't started yet. Can you make it happen? And they know that for me, when I ask that, if it's about people, it takes priority over everything else, right? So they're going to drop everything else. So maybe talk about that, Megan, how like you always know whether it's a time of chaos or not, how like people are the thing.
Yeah, I think that just like knowing, like we basically have almost like a hierarchy of needs type of thing in the business, right? Where like at the very top always is people, like clients, future clients, anything like that. Like we always make sure that anything to do with anyone within the people realm, always top priority. So essentially, like we will reorganize things however we need to in order to make space for that to be the thing that happens now. So even if, I don't know, I can't even think of an example right now, but like, even if
if you had an important project on deck, you would just move it.
Right. Like we did, we were going to be redoing like some of your funnels and stuff like that. And we we're like, cool, no longer a priority right now.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're pushing. Okay. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
But like, that's no longer the priority right now. We're allocating all of our time and energy to making sure that the clients get that extra support that you're providing right now, and making sure that we're keeping track of that so that, we have like a spreadsheet that tracks, who has gotten which emails, and making sure that, all of that is followed up on, so that, we're not getting like caught up in what we were supposed to be doing or had planned on doing, and other things fall through the crack. And it's not always about just like adding more to the plate. Like I think that what we did really well, over the past month or so has really been just like shifting priorities around and, making sure that whatever we needed to shift to make this the focus, that's what we did. Right.
Yeah, totally. And I think that that's really relevant because so many of my clients have kind of had to let go of like the perfect plans that they were really attached to. You know what I mean? In this time. And I think just being willing to do that, like just being willing to like reprioritize, move things, not get really attached to things is so useful, especially as things change, the industry evolves, things happen, all of that kind of stuff. Like when you can like practice that non-attachment / know what your priorities are, everything gets easier, right? And I also just want to talk about the people thing, both from like a branding place and from like a strategic place. Like I think that from a brand perspective, like I care the fucking most about the experience people have when they interact with a lit up life. Like nothing is more important to me in my business. And I highly recommend taking a similar stance. Because when we talk about a brand, like that is what we mean, right? Like when I think of like companies I love or businesses that I love, it's 100% based off of my interaction with that brand. Like this is like a stupid example and I won't go off on a tangent for a second, but like there's this company who throughout this, I had placed an order of like a couple $1,000s to, and they have been absolute shit at answering my questions, helping me in any way, shape, or form. And I know they're pivoting and probably having to figure stuff out just like all of us, but that totally changed my brand relationship with them. And the likelihood that I will ever spend a couple $1,000s with them again is literally zero at this point. So I think it's just really helpful to see that, because it's almost like what I think can happen in our head is we're like, yeah, the people, but I've got to make sales. And I just can't tell you enough how like the way that the people who have already bought from you experience your brand is the single biggest impactor on the next sale that you create. And also it's just really strategic in the sense that of course client retention is cheaper, better, and faster. So it's not to say these aren't amazing humans. And of course I want to work with all of them individually, but I'm just talking about how you guys can look at it in your business too. Like doubling down on like making your clients happy, keeping clients, re-signing clients, especially in a time like this, is so useful. Because if I think about all the clients I have, all of the ones who have lost any business during this have been for only two reasons. One, that person had not interacted with their brand enough to have loyalty, right? Or two, it was like an in-person thing and there was just no other way around it. But like, I think that that's so true. Megan, what are your kind of thoughts on that? Hey, Jen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things where I think you just need, like in times like this, I think that it's almost like doubling down on what's already in front of you, right? Yes. And what's already working. Yes. And that's kind of the easiest and most impactful thing that you can do. So I just feel like, you know, yes, there are like, it might be like really disappointing to not go after like the new thing or the big shift that you were going to make or something like that. But I think it's just like, ultimately the business is about people, right? It's about your relationship with people, no matter what you sell. And I think that the important thing is to just like double down on that in times like this, when there is like this kind of general feeling of uncertainty and instability a little bit, right? And so to basically just like be that constant, to be that person that they can be like, cool, I know I can rely on Lacey no matter what, right? And like even like, because I think that a lot of people now know too, like, cool, I know that I can rely on Lacey and the team because her team is there for me as well, because we have that relationship. Like we're starting
a lot of people, if they have a question, they'll like say to me, they'll be like, oh, I was going to ask you about this, but I'm actually just going to email your team. I was like, I mean, I'm still here. You can ask me, but okay. But I think that's so true. Like they know that you guys care just as much as I care. And that's like a really valuable thing to feel like just as much as like, I'm going to support them in the business and the growth and the whatever, you guys are going to answer any question they have. You're going to get them any resource they need. You're going to follow up with them as quickly as possible. Like there's just so much value in that. And I think that like from day one, I've taken that stance. And then every team member we've brought on since has kind of been like updated on that stance, so to speak.
Right.
And truly, I believe that that's why we've grown. And I believe that that's why we're not just going to, like stabilize through this. We're going to continue to grow through this. And I really know that that's why. And I think that to echo Megan's point a little bit on that of like the double down on what's in front of you, like it's so much simpler when you look at it from that perspective, right? Like it was so easy for me to be like, I already have X amount of clients, waiting, and they're probably feeling really unsure and really uncertain, and they're probably wishing they were able to work with me right now. How do I give them as much as I possibly can in the interim so that they feel great? And you guys, it's like been a few videos and some like books and some extra resources that we had and things like that. Like it's not, right? Like it's taking 20 hours of my time, but it's the most worthwhile time I've spent in the last month. I emailed Megan the other day and said like, I've never been more proud of how we operate a Lit Up Life than I have been in the last month, right? And it's just because we were like people.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So then the next thing is
priorities.
Thank you. I was like, oh, it starts with a P. It's so close. I can taste it. And yet it's not there. This is why you need it.
It's Monday. It's good.
This is why you need it. So priorities. So this is something we've talked about, I think, a few times on live stream, but it's really something to revisit right now is like, does your team / do you know your priorities, and can they make decisions and act accordingly? And do you know what your priorities are? And do you have to change them during a time like this? Like priorities come top down, right? I see so many people struggle with this because they're almost looking for their team to tell them the priorities, right? Or they're unclear about them. And so in communicating with their team, they're really struggling. And so I feel like the thing that we always are constantly doing is doing a priority reset in a Lit Up Life, because like Megan needs the team to be able to act according to our big priorities versus doing random things while I'm thinking something else. So I'll kind of talk about that from my end in a second, but Megan, I would love for you to talk about that from your end, because I feel like from the team perspective, it's like wildly important.
Yeah, I think that like, so two things. I think that one thing that has been super important.
Can you guys tell that she's been in the Lit Up Life for 3.5 years? Two things.
I thought about that the other day. I was like, oh my God, I'm lazy.
Two things.
Now I'm going to forget what the two things are.
On a call, she got on the call and was like, okay, listen, so I have two things. And then she was like, damn it, what is going on?
So, first thing is, I think that one of the most important things that has made it easy for me to mostly understand priorities is to have basically to have you have always been like, people are always the priority, and have almost like, I think, I don't know, like a year ago or something, we did a live stream on like the 3 rules that we have on for a Lit Up Life or something like that.
Yeah,
it's a really good one. And I feel like, having it be like people come first, service first, clients first, all of like, whatever you want to say, like the rule is, but having that as like the always, this is the priority makes it so clear for me. And then to be able to like communicate that with the team that like, when you're stuck in decision, always lean toward clients, right? Like whatever is going to serve clients and people the most, that's the decision to make. And that's the priority there. That's what to focus on, right? And so I think that just generally speaking, having more of like a clear priority in the business as a whole, that this is always the thing, has been really important. But then two, I think that having, the consistent communication that we have, like, I think that we do like obviously like almost daily check-ins in Basecamp. We do like a weekly like check-in on things in Basecamp, and then we have calls consistently as well. So I feel like having those touch points where it's not only about like what's on your to-do list and stuff like that, like the micro details, but we always talk about like, here's what's on our plate for this week, or here's, you know, here's where we're at, and here's, you know, what we might be juggling between, and then being able to come to you and say like, here are like 5 things that were on our plates. What's the priority here? Like what's like, let's put these in order of what's most important and stuff like that. So I that was like a kind of roundabout way, but I think that like generally speaking, one like general rules of the business to operate by, but then also having that consistent communication to touch base in a kind of bigger picture sense is just super helpful.
So one of the things that Megan is saying under all of that, which is something that I harp on my clients about all the time, is you have to teach your team to think how you think. Mm-hmm. And it's also one of the hardest things for most people to do. But it is the singular thing that has allowed me to continue to scale one-on-one and to even do all of the people things that we just talked about, quite honestly, is because my team has learned to think how I think. And so I don't have to make every micro decision in my business at this point. Megan just knows how I think enough that she's got it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what she's saying about like, know the priorities, have the consistent communication. It's ultimately like, because of that consistent communication, she's learning how I think. So the reason I learned this and realized how important it was, besides a Lit Up Life, is I used to work in the nonprofit world. And so I got like, I don't know, 6 or 7 promotions really, really quickly, and then was the director for some time. But it was really helpful and interesting because I had come from like the bottom level position, let's say, and the disparity between what I understood at this level versus what I understood at this level. Like I would have worked entirely different at this level if I had some of the bigger picture view that I had up here. And so I've always known that in bringing that to this is like, if your team gets the big picture, the details get easy for them. If your team is totally in the details and doesn't see the big picture, the details are really hard and they don't make a lot of fucking sense. So I remember at the nonprofit thinking that that job I had at that baseline was really hard and there were so many things that didn't make sense. And like, I didn't know why we were doing this or that or whatever. Then once I was here, I was like, of course we were doing that. That makes perfect fucking sense. Like, right. But like, how would I have known that then if I didn't have leadership communicating that? Right.
100%. And I think that it goes to the point of like, being able to like make smaller decisions, like your team is more able to do that because of the communication of here's how I think, here's why this is important, here's why these play together. And ultimately, like, here's almost like the just general priorities of what's most important always, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why what helps, especially in difficult times, like I was mentioning, like when I was getting divorced or when all of this kind of blew up and everybody needed a lot of support, is like, I need to not be making micro decisions all day because that will take up most of my day. And then I can't go do the other things, or I'm not in the right frame of mind to be able to make those decisions, or I'm going through a difficult period and I can't. Like the thing that I cherish so much about Megan and what we've built here is that I know she'll make the best decision she possibly can, thinking about it how I do. And so a lot of things that I have my clients do is like all their team goes through one point person so that they're the ones communicating with that point person. So the point person is learning how they think about everything, right? Versus like everyone's in silos, or, literally sitting down with team or that one person every week and being like, here's how I'm thinking about things this week. Here's why I'm thinking we do this. I think so often with teamwork, our tendency is to communicate tasks versus like actual thought processes. And tasks don't mean shit if the thought process isn't communicated alongside them, right?
Well, I think when you separate the two, like if you only talk about tasks and not the thought process around it, that's when you start to feel frustrated. Like, oh, why didn't my team do this right? Or why did they make the wrong decision on this? I would have never done it that way or something like that. But it's because you didn't really attach it to the thought process or the why behind it, and kind of the, like you just have to like attach the task to something a little bit bigger so that it like sits a little bit deeper and they have a deeper understanding, like a holistic understanding of what's happening, rather than like, here's a task, just do the thing, check it off the list, move on, right? Like, I think that being able to like think about what you're doing as you're doing it just helps, like, for me as a team member, but like any person, do it more effectively because you have just like a more well-rounded understanding of what you're doing and why.
100%. And that makes knowing your priorities a non-negotiable for you, because you have to then communicate it to people. So like, I always have to know the priorities in a lot of life, because it's my job, only my job, to communicate that to Megan, so the Megan can communicate that to team and so on. And so when all of this went down or during difficult times, like the priorities might shift. Like ours went into people overdrive, basically, like we were just saying. It also meant we had to change a ton of content, which we'll talk about, and things like that. So I had to be like, here are our top priorities. Like, it's to serve our current people really, really well. It's to make our content really applicable and to be, a total service to everyone right now. So that was it. And so then if you can lock into that, and then team knows that, and then you know that, and then you're acting from that place, everyone's moving in alignment. Right? If you decide that in your brain, but team still thinks it's like status quo over here, shit's going to get confusing real fast. And that's where I see the most people get the most frustrated with their team, is because they went somewhere in their brain and they didn't bring their team with them. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
So in terms of priorities, I think something else that's really helpful to note here is that we work on a trade-off system, is basically how I would share that. Meaning, like, when we have something else happen, Megan's team's job isn't to then just add always, right? Because this is another thing that gets really hard during times of chaos. It's almost too tempting to just add versus be like, okay, no, we have a certain amount of time, give or take, that we want to get things done in. How do we reprioritize that? And the reason we do that is, one, because profit margin matters to us in our business, but two, because we know we're being ineffective if we're just always adding, right? So if we were like, okay, everything's status quo, you still need to go through all those funnels, plus we need to redo the content, plus we need to serve our people more, plus. We can add the hours for that, but ultimately we're not being effective and we're not going to get it all done really well. So Megan, share that from your perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like
you're like, just fuck no.
I feel like one of the things that I see happen most often is typically team people are yes people. And they will just say like, yes, we can add more. Yes, we can do that, blah, blah, blah. Like, I definitely am guilty of this. But I think that what happens is that if you just continue to add more and more and more without any trade-offs, especially if it's something that's added very, very quickly,
right?
Like this, everything shifted in our world in like a week or something. It was like 1 week is like, yeah, exactly. Like, oh, coronavirus, whatever. And then like a day later, it was like, fuck, like our entire world is different. Right. And so I feel like, especially when things shift very quickly and you have to make different priorities and adjustments and stuff like that. I think when you only add more and more, that starts to add into overwhelm. It adds into like just burnout, right? And so when your team is overwhelmed, when your team is burnt out, when your team is overworked and like just adding more and more and more, and they don't get any type of trade-off, any type of like pullback, that just ultimately is not sustainable. And it's ultimately going to just create like a negative, like they're not going to be as effective in the work, but it's also just going to be creating like a negative vibe and and relationship, right? And I think that ultimately, like one of the things that has been really important during this time between us, but then also with other team members, has been just communicating like, here's what's going on, here are priorities, here's what we want to happen, like what do we need to do within these priorities to make sure, like, hey, if you're starting to be like, hey, I'm tapped out, we need to have a conversation around that. Right. And figure out where we need to shift things so that the actual priorities are getting met and we are doing the work that we need to do without needing to add on like extra stuff that can be pushed back by a month or whatever. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. And that kind of goes with Megan was mentioning that live stream we did of rules. Another rule that we have in a lit up life is nothing is an emergency. And that rule is especially useful during times of chaos because every motherfucking thing feels like an emergency sometimes, right? And so even like when I was saying we were giving client resources and whatever, it was like I was doing the video and then they had whatever time they needed to get it out. Like it's not like this is an emergency and it needs to go out today. Sometimes we prioritize it going out that day or whatever, but it's kind of like really being in that stance of like something can wait a month. Like you need a business where something can wait a month. If you don't have a business where something can wait a month, trust me, something is wrong in that business, right? And if you only have a business where things have to happen this second, today, like you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to burn your team out. So I think that that has been a really useful thing that is always a rule for us, but has especially been useful. Like, don't get me wrong. It's felt like a sprint, you know, serving our peeps and reworking content and all of that, but it's never, ever felt like an emergency ever. And it's because I'm like so fucking unavailable for that. And so is Megan, like so unavailable for anything to be that important, except for our people. That is the only thing. And even that's not an emergency. It's just a trade-off or a priority, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just like you're not like asking me to like wake up at 2 a.m. to send someone a message that lives in Australia or something. Like that's not what we're talking about. But like we are saying like make it a priority to respond to client messages quickly, like as quickly as reasonably possible. You know, we're not like checking inbox every 5 seconds, but we are checking it more frequently than maybe we normally do or something like that. Right. So I think it's just like not making it an emergency, but making it a priority. And I think that like, as long as you can separate those two things, then I think you're good.
Belinda says she loves being unavailable for emergencies. Yes. It is like the most important rule. Again, especially when things feel chaotic. I think that like grounds our team so much and really helps us to be like, okay, like there are trade-offs, there are priorities, there are things, of course, but nothing is so big or important that it's going to like change the game in our business tomorrow. Like if the funnels need to wait a month, they wait a month. And like, I think that that's such a mindset thing because we can make everything an emergency and everything really important. And that's when, like Megan said, team gets burnt out, you get burnt out, nothing gets done really well. And the chaos really feels like fucking chaos, right? Like,
totally.
You know
like it automatically pushes you into like this reactive mode where you're just responding and reacting to everything rather than like, you know, allowing there to be things popping up and kind of creating a centeredness where it's like, cool, all of this is happening and we're not ignoring it. We are just responding to it from a more focused standpoint rather than like reacting to every small thing that comes up.
Yeah. So on that note, the last point is to kind of be willing to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we haven't pivoted any of our offers. I think, in fact, it's funny because I actually feel like our offers were almost like built for a time like this in a sense, in terms of the revenue share and all of that kind of stuff. So we haven't had to pivot any of our offers. We've been lucky in that sense, but we had a retreat we had to move. We had 2 retreats we had to move actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, we had a lot of content that we pretty much, put on ice for now. We had plans to promote certain things, sell certain things that we kind of completely shifted because, again, our priority is people. And so we knew like people needed our support now. So I think like whatever things happened on a Friday, we had a live stream series up by the next Monday. Like we were on top of like, this is the thing that has to happen. So I think that it's like Megan said about staying focused on what's in front of you, but don't get so mired in the details that you forget what's actually in front of you. So what's always in front of us here is serve our people, right? And so nothing shifted in terms of that priority. We just pivoted what that looked like. I think what happens is we get so down in the nitty gritty details, like it has to be this launch and this time frame and this thing. And then we try to reprioritize all of that and it gets confusing. But if we're like, our priority is to serve our people to the best of our ability, of course, I'm getting on a fucking live stream every day next week. They need to hear what to do during this time. Like then it all gets easier when you don't make it about the minutia and you make it about like the specifics. And that's how you pivot really, really well, because you know that the pivoting is about the right priority and not just a random pivot, right?
Yeah, I think that it's like you, by having your priorities kind of outlined and knowing what they are before a time of chaos allows you to respond accordingly during a time of chaos, right? We're like, I think that that's what allows you to like know how do we need to shift or pivot this here versus just like, not really know, like versus like reacting out of like fear of the unknown or, something like that, right? Like which totally. I think is just really easy to do during times like this. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and like having processes done in advance. Yeah. And that's maybe exactly what you were just about to say.
Yeah. I think that like one of the things that allowed us to shift, because we really did, like we typically plan content well in advance. We repurpose a lot of content, like all of that. And so, and we typically, if we're writing anything, it's like written, weeks in advance or something like that. And I think that, when all of this came up, we really had to pivot in the messaging quite a bit because the things that we planned on sharing and talking about weren't necessarily as like relevant or important to current times. And so that was a big shift. But even though the actual like messaging and content shifted, the process that we had did not. Like everything that we had set up behind the scenes, the entire system that we had for repurposing content, for planning content, for sharing content and posting and all of that, everything was completely the same and following the same system. It's just that the actual messaging is shifted.
So that's what we mean when we say pivot to a certain extent too, is like you should be pivoting a part of the system, but not having to pivot all of the system, right? Because that's when it gets really, really confusing really fast. And it feels like the chaos overwhelms you when you're just like, listen, we have a system that works to sell. We have a system that works for content and repurposing and whatever. And our job right now is to figure out how to pivot the message around that, but it's not to pivot the system. Everything gets easier. This is true whether you have a team or not, honestly. Like you should still know your system. Before I had Megan, like I knew we're posting here and we're posting there and it looks like this and we sell this many times and all of that. Like I am such a proponent of decide in advance on everything. Because that's how you create this like replicable thing. Like all my clients that come to me and are feeling frustrated when they sign up with me, 9 times out of 10, it's because they don't have a system that actually supports them in that way. And the clients who have been able to pivot and sail through this had foundation, had system, had support that they knew like, cool, my pivot looks like this, but I have the foundations to support that. And that could be true whether or not you have a team, right?
100%. I will say that it makes it way easier if you have a team to have a system. Like, and I feel like too, you know, I know a couple of people that are hiring team members right now.
Yeah.
So if you're hiring right now and you don't have those systems in place and you're not making those decisions in advance and planning things out, it just becomes a lot harder to bring on a team member.
Yeah.
So, totally. and I think that, you know, whether you have a team now or you will in the future, I just think that having those systems to rely on and to kind of, that's what allows you to kind of put things on rinse and repeat. And so that when kind of your outward circumstances are changing, you can, like we said, pivot the messaging, but not the system. And you can still rely on the system to make it easy to make those pivots.
100%. And I think that like, that is what looks like ease, if that makes sense. Like, I think it looks outwardly like, oh, it's been so easy for you to like, so many of the people that are clients that are starting with us have made so many comments to me on like the way you show up and the way you support us and all that. Like, I can't believe how easy you make it look, or I can't believe how much you're out there right now and like sharing relevant content or whatever. And that's why, is because the system works. We can feed whatever content we want into it, but the system itself functions really well. And I think that that's something I've just become so much more aware of during this time, is like, that was like the singular reason we were able to like adapt pretty quickly and serve our people really well, is because of that. I think it's also the thing that like feels like it takes a lot of time and like you don't know how to do it. And like, we're probably like, people are hearing us say that and almost like being annoyed in a sense of like, but what does that look like? And what's the system and all that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And so I basically twisted Megan's arm, for lack of a better way to say it, because she's a gem.
Strongly encouraged. Strongly encouraged.
Yeah, I strongly encourage Megan to just put together something that you guys could have that shows what our system is and what we do. I just want it to be like something that isn't a hindrance. Like, I think what I mean by that is like, it's so easy to be like, but how, but what would that look like? And da, 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 da. And it's like, we'll just tell you, like, we don't mind giving that to you and sharing that with you. Like, Megan put together our exact system that she uses for a lit up life for pushing out content basically, and put it in a template that you can purchase. So, but the reason we did that is because, again, like it's easy to pivot and show up and do all of these things when you have that in place. So don't let that be the thing that keeps you from doing it. Right.
100%. Well, and I tried as much as I could to like make it like, we don't have super complicated systems. Like, they're very simple.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the reason that they work. And that's the reason that they are so supportive in times like this, because it's not like, you know, it's something that you can set up probably in like 15 minutes. And something that, again, like, you can have this system, whether you have a team or not, right? And just having that system that makes it so that you're just basically like rinsing and repeating, and having it something that's super simple and easy to implement, I think just can make such a big difference, both in just like staying consistent. Like, you have, you know, you've been posting probably more lately, but like very consistently with all of this relevant content because of the system that we've built. And then it also minimizes like the micro decisions of like, what should we post today? Like, for you and for
how much should we sell?
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, shouldn't we sell something? Like, we have a system that prompts us like, here's how often we're selling. Here's how to like map this out into, you know, posting in different platforms in different areas and stuff. So yeah, I put it all together into a template. And so I can share that with you guys. I'll pop I can't access the comments right now, but
okay. Okay, Juliet. Juliet, come back and watch the replay fully. I think you'll like it a lot, Juliet. Belinda says, I'm giving you both gold stars for modeling this during the current madness. Rock on. Thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah. So if you want this, it's what, like $25? It's like nothing. Yeah. Grab it so that you can feel like if you have a pivot, you still have a foundation. Also, because you don't want to make all of those micro decisions. Like that was such a point that we were making earlier and that Megan just made again, like, especially during times of chaos and when you're feeling overwhelmed, making all of those minute decisions will fucking kill you. Legit, right? The more you remove those, the better things get. Like, I feel like the amount of decisions I make day to day in a lit up life is so minimal at this point because of stuff like this, right? And then even when we pivoted the content, I didn't have to redecide like, okay, but how much are we selling right now? And how often are we posting? And like, how often is relevant content like, we knew. And so I think that that's just one of those things where it takes time, energy, and effort to create that system, to plan for, well, I guess it won't if you use the template, but in general, it takes that to plan for all of that kind of stuff. But it's like the most worthwhile time, because then when shit hits the fan or whatever happens, like motherfucking Julia Wells is here. And like when your business blows up in, 0.9 seconds and you have all of this stuff going down, like you need to have some of these things underneath you to be able to go to that next level or to be able to make that pivot. So, yeah, it's a good team, but it's also a good system and it's definitely a good mindset.
Totally.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Maybe tell them what they get with the template.
Yeah. So, I basically give everything's in Google Sheets, Google Drive. So, you can easily make a copy, add it to your own Google Drive. But I basically share a spreadsheet that shows our system, and I walk through examples of exactly like the content that we shared the past few weeks throughout the coronavirus and just what that looked like, how we map it out. I share like a template that we use for distributing said content.
Like pushing it out.
So you can see how we organize it on the back end, how we plan for it, but then also how we like map out where it's getting posted and when, and then how to share that with team if you have one. And then, so I have a walkthrough video showing all of that. And then I have a blank version that you can just copy to your own Google Drive and then customize it for your own business.
Cool. I love that. That's so helpful. Thank you so much for doing that.
You are welcome.
So appreciate it.
Yeah. It's at alituplife.com/template. And then you guys, if you guys get it and you go through it and you have questions, just feel free to reach out to me too. I'm super available to like answer any questions that you have or anything like that. I know that sometimes like starting systems can be a little intimidating. So I'm super happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
And I think one last thing that I just want to touch on that you said there was that idea of like, it's going to seem simple. I think it's an Einstein quote, but it's basically like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. And I just really want to touch on that because I think that like so many of the systems that get sold in our space are almost aimed at making it feel like there's this super complicated thing that you don't know and you absolutely need someone. I'm going to give you like the truth. You're going to look at this and probably be like, duh, fucking duh. Like I could have thought of that. That makes so much sense. Of course it looks like that. It's just the blank slate that's so hard for all of us. And so this isn't like, let us be clear. This is not like this 12-step system that's going to like, whatever, give you a genie and a magic lamp or some shit like that. But what it is going to do is make shit easy for you and simple. And that's how we think about everything in a lit up life. Like if something can't be explained, I always tell my clients this about strategy. Like if I'm like, what's the strategy? Like when they start working with me and it takes them 15 minutes to explain it, I'm like, wrong strategy, wrong strategy. Like, right. So the same is true here. Like this is built to be simple and easy for the exact reason that number one, that's how you'll actually do it. And number two, that's how you can pass it along to team and actually have them help you versus like having this whole complicated thing that is really complicated just for the sake of seeming like it's strategic or something. We're not down with that.
100%. Well, and like I said, we literally have everything in Google Drive, and it's, totally. You don't need to like buy fancy software or like have all these like different tools and platforms and all of that. Like we store everything in Google Drive. It's easy to share with our team and to collaborate on different things.
Yes.
And again, just like having it be super simple is what allows us to stick with it and to stay consistent with it. I think if it was overly complicated and we had like all these crazy things around it, I just don't think that we would stick with it. I don't think that it would be actually useful because it would just seem like too much going on. And so, it is really simple, but hopefully it is useful to just have that like starting point so that you're not just like starting from a blank slate kind of thing.
Totally. And it's exactly what we use. Like we're like, we're not about being like, oh, but we kept this one extra thing. Like this is just the whole thing. It doesn't matter to us. Feel free. So hopefully that was helpful. If you guys have other questions for Megan, feel free to let us know. We'll drop the link. I think it's alituplife.com/template. But we'll definitely drop the link. If you have questions, you can email Megan, support@alituplife.com, or just drop them here if you have any other questions. But honestly, I think that is like a huge resource. I'm so grateful to you for doing that for us. I know that I very strongly suggested it, and I just appreciate you and love you so much. And also thank you for being here. Like I know that this is just you giving your time to this community because you know how important that is to me and to Lit Up Life. But thank you for being part of that, because I think that I just want to like cheer you on for that and tell you how grateful we all are to you, because I think that like you can like say you're about something or you can really be about something. And I just see you be about that in a Lit Up Life. You don't just say like, oh, we're about people because Lacey says that. Like you act so congruently and in integrity with that. And I just love you and appreciate you.
Thank you. I love you.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks guys. Have a good week.
Thanks guys.
Bye.